Hello all. Today we will look at one of the important keyword in Java, which is static keyword. Static keyword is introduced in Java to access the data members or methods or the blocks at the class level. So they can be utilized even without instantiating a class. So that if there are any pre-initiation checks that needs to be done, um, we those can be done at the static level at using the static. So static keyword can be used in various ways. One is the static blocks, to the variables, and then to the methods. They can be used at these three different places in Java language, and they can be even used at the classes. However, the class should be nested within another class. It cannot be at a class level, at the higher class level, parent class level, but it can be at the inner class level. A static class can be created within by enclosing an outer class. Okay, so this is how it is. So static elements, be it a block or a variable or a method, is tied at the class level rather than the instance level. So all these elements that are created, which are static, reside in the metaspace area, in the common area, so that though are tied against the static class. So all the methods which are specific to the instances which are created against an in an object of that particular class will be stored in the heap area, whereas coming to the static elements are at the class level and will be stored in the metaspace. Okay, so that is the reason a static element, or for example a static um, element, for example variable, can be utilized in any method within an class, whereas an instance variable, for example, we create an instance variable. Okay, so this instance cannot be used in a static parameter, in a static method. For example, if we try to do this, make static class dot instance static, so you can only reference a static element in a static method, similarly in a static block too. Primary reason for this: a static block, a static variable, is created at the class level, as we already mentioned. Okay, so at the class level we can invoke these methods and instance variables by using the class name. However, if we look at the instances, class level instances other than the static ones, they are tied against an object. So the object should be created. The class should be instantiated only when the instance will be populated, will come to life. So since we cannot access a variable which is tied to the object, which post instantiation, even without instantiating it, right? So that's where we cannot do it. However, if we have an instance method, for example in the static, let us say public void at data. If we use this here, we can use both the we can use the static variable member as well, and an instance member as well, right? And okay, so there's okay, so this is how it is. Okay, so the next thing is, since these the inner static blocks and static elements and the static method are at the class level. Okay, so at least these static blocks are executed when the class which contains these static blocks is accessed within the executing class. For example, the static class is method with static class is mentioned within the same class as static demo. Now let us see whether it gets instantiated invoked or not. So if we see here, right, so in the nested, okay, and one more thing is we can only invoke the nested classes by using the reference of the parent classes. Okay, so here if we see, we called the nested constructor. For example, the nested constructor here by passing the data member, okay, and which is stored within its object. Okay, and we have a instance method of get data. So if we see here, we are able to access the nested class by invoking its outer class dot the nested class, and then we are invoking the get data method, which is displaying the data that is passed on. Okay, and if we see here, the static class is not invoked because it is not being used uh, while instantiating or invoking this class, right? Now let us say if we change it a little. Okay, now if we run the method, run the run this, we can see here, first my first static block is invoked. Okay, and then the value and then the second block, yeah, yeah, the value is instantiated and the display data is invoked to display what is the value that is instantiated by the static block. And then the second this is the second static block which is executed. Okay, and then if we see here, the constructor is invoked. So the constructor will be invoked at the last, and the static blocks and the static data members that are present in there will be initialized or instantiated up ahead. Okay, now let us say we have a static method of display data. Okay, we have a static method of display data here. So let us just try to invoke that method rather than invoking the constructor, right? Even though if we just invoke the static method from this class. Okay, so here if we see, sorry, yeah, here if we see, it still executed the static block, first static block, and then it executed the second static block. That's it, and it didn't invoke the instance method. Sorry, it didn't invoke the constructor, right? And then it used the static method to display the data. So first, the static blocks and the static elements will be invoked first. Okay, so this is the scenario. This is how it is executed. Okay, and let me show you regarding, yeah, and static class sc equal to, okay, now, okay, okay. Now if we have created an object, if we have created an instance of the static class, and we are invoking the instance method get data. Okay, now if we run it, so we could see that the first static block and second static block and then the constructor are invoked. And in the get data method, if we see, we are displaying the static value and the instance value. Since the instance value is not assigned any data, it is not displaying anything, it's displaying null, right? So if we see here, the static element can be used or invoked within a non-static method, okay, or an instance method, whereas coming to the static method can only invoke or use a only use a static data member. Okay, for example, even in, okay, let's say, okay, if we remove this, right, so here it's at the class level. So here in the in the display data, we were able to invoke the static member of this particular class. Okay, whereas coming to the same thing, for instance, we will not be able to invoke it. Okay, so whenever we want to create a or data member which needs to be utilized at the class level and which needs to be worked upon at the class level, then we can mark that as static, and we can expose a method which can be used in making actions, taking actions on that particular data member, static data member. Okay, so this is about the static keyword. Thank you for watching. And if you have any comments, please put it in the comments block. And if you would like to see in many more any specific topics, please do let me know.